Episode 2 of my mother's diaries. Winter at the farm, Hiltonbury Farm, in 1948. Hello, I'm Andy Vining. So welcome back. Thank you for being here with me again. In the first episode, I shared a little of who I am, of my family, and of the diaries my mother quietly kept beginning in 1948. Today, we step properly into her world. It is late January 1948 when the diary started. England is deep in winter. Life, as always, moves between worry and warmth, between the hard work of the farm and the quiet love of the family. These are my mother's days and her writings of those days read by me, with some interventions to explain some of the detail. January was drawing to a close, and the winter felt long and heavy upon us. My father, Dad, had been quite poorly that week, and the worry of it sat quietly with me as I went about the ordinary business of the days. Still, life had to be kept moving. I went into Winchester with Betty, my sister, grateful for the small distraction of the trip. While there, we had Heather's polyphotos taken. She looked such a picture, bright-eyed and beautifully turned out. I bought new shoes for the children too, which cost £3 and fourpence. That's £160 today. A sum that made me catch my breath, though it couldn't be helped. Later, when back at the farm, Eric Coates and Philip came by, and we sold them a goose. A little bit of pin money for me. It felt like one of those days full of little errands and bigger concerns, all jumbled together. The next morning brought a small measure of relief. Dad seemed a little brighter. The white bougainvillea in the kitchen had opened fully and filled the house with a sweet, unexpected fragrance, lifting my spirits despite the dreadful weather. Rain fell endlessly. Rain, rain, rain. Outside, drumming on the windows, as if it had no intention of stopping whatsoever. Still, the rain was with us when Heather and I decided to walk to Beechcroft. Although very wet, it's about 1.5 miles from the farm to Beechcroft. Mother would have walked down the farm drive through the puddles, then up to the Baddesley Road crossroads. Turned right along Hiltonbury Road, which in 1948 was just a gravel track. There was a huge sand and gravel pit on our right where we used to play as kids, where the playing fields are now. And along that road, on one side was a Polish refugee camp, on the other side an American army camp. All gone now, of course, on all his houses. The road, as I've said, was gravel with concrete edges along each side, so it was probably quite a walk. But my mother says that it seems that Heather was wearing a fur-trimmed bonnet, and that was much admired by those we passed on the way. Once I got to Beechcroft, I learnt that Dad had had a bad night again, and I carried this worry with me as we went. The news everywhere was of Gandhi, poor old Gandhi. He'd been assassinated. It cast a sombre shadow over the day, as though the whole world had taken on the grey sky that was above us. But life continued, quietly and stubbornly, as it always does. I gathered a bunch of snowdrops from the garden when we got back, their white heads nodding as if spring were already whispering from far off. John went to the football. Saints beat Newcastle 4-2 at the Dell, which cheered him up immensely. Marjorie and Malcolm West called in, bringing a warm familiarity to an otherwise tiring day, and that night, thankfully, Dad rested better. It was only a small mercy, but enough to end the month with a touch more hope than it began. Chapter 2, February 1948. February began with snowdrops everywhere, more than I'd seen in years. I picked masses of them, 8 dozen bunches in all. That's 96 bunches, their white heads bobbing like little lanterns of hope. John delivered them to Baker's Groceries on the parade to sell to make me some more pin money. Bet and Fred called in. It was Fred's birthday, so there was a bit of a cheerful talk in the house, and Father had had a better night and it seemed a little bit more himself, which lifted us all. Leslie Willis, a friend of John's, arrived the next day to begin a month's training with John. He was going to buy a farm in Devon, and he fitted into the rhythm of the farm almost at once. Father even managed to get up for a short while, and when he telephoned that evening he sounded a lot brighter. The rain still came down endlessly, grey and persistent, though it cleared by evening. I then cycled round to Beechcroft just for a change and found father up again and looking much improved. There were more snowdrop picking at Flexford the next day and later that week, and Fred and Jess Ropley dropped by in the evening. Life was busy, as it always seemed to be. John and Leslie were out hare shooting and came home triumphantly with 6. They go into the larder. I spent the day making Jennifer's birthday cake, and the kitchen was warm with baking smells and children drifting in and out. Her birthday arrived the 6th of February with great excitement. We gave her a kilt, which she was utterly delighted with, twirling about to see it flare. I spent the whole day cooking for a party, and what a party it was. Hectic from start to finish, but a good one, full of children's laughter and that pleasant exhaustion that comes only after a full house. John managed to slip away to the football. Saints won to his delight again, and after all the chaos, on Sunday we ate one of John's hares for Sunday dinner. It was excellent. Bet and Fred dropped by again in the evening, and we had a lovely evening with them. Monday bought the washing as usual, but it was a lovely day, and it meant everything was dry by 10 o'clock. At least it had stopped raining, a small triumph. I then met Jennifer, Janet and Andrew from school and saw to the arrangements of a pig being picked up to go to the slaughterhouse. Just the ordinary business of the household. On Shrove Tuesday, pancakes were made with lemon and a real treat for the kids. Certainly loved them with lashings of sugar, even though it's rationed. But luckily we have a good supply in the room up the old back stairs. Auntie Bella took Heather out while I went to the hairdresser's for a small luxury. John fetched the pig offal and meat from the slaughterhouse, and I had a lot of work to do making brawn from the offal. The next day, Leslie drove us all the way down to Exeter to see his farm. It was a lovely day, and the drive through Dorset and Devon was beautiful. Picture book countryside. His farm was charming too. Mother stayed home and watched the children for us. When we got back to Hiltonbury, the day ended on a darker note. Father was very poorly again when we visited him, and a letter arrived from Bob, my brother, saying that his wife Bunty had pneumonia. Then on the Thursday evening the 12th, we went to the Conservative ball in Winchester. That wasn't a bad evening, all told. John discovered he'd won £3 7 and sixpence, about £200 today, on the football pools, which felt like a windfall. At least he paid for the shoes I'd bought for last month. Next day, I slipped over to Beechcroft for half an hour. Heather's polyphotos had arrived, and they were jolly good. John Bucket, a farmer from Allington Lane, Eastleigh, came in later, and he, John and Leslie talked farming long into the evening. Then came a blow, February the 14th, Valentine's Day. Father fell really ill and had to be taken into hospital. That evening John went to Hursley Lodge, and Bet and Fred came to supper, their company a comfort to me. The next day I picked up the last of the snowdrops. Mother visited Father in hospital. He'd had another slight heart attack. John and Joan Bucket came back again, but this time came to tea with young David. He's such a lovely baby. It was a day of mixed emotions, flowers fading, babies thriving, father struggling. Time moved on. It was also Michael Adkins' birthday. Michael was Auntie Bella's grandson, Andy's cousin, and it was also another washing day. All done by lunchtime. Mother came back from hospital, very worried. Father was unable to keep anything down. The cold weather continued, though at least it was dry. I planted some old bulbs out on the lawn, and John and Leslie went to a farming meeting. Father worsened again. The days were suddenly running on worry. I took Heather to Dr. Sibley for her immunisation, and then went to the hospital with Mother. But today Father seemed better, genuinely better, and we dared hope that he would get home soon. But the weather turned bitterly cold again, although sunny, and Betty was starting a ruddy-cut rug and had bought woolen canvas for it. I wondered idly when on earth I would ever get mine made that I've had for some time, and never had time to start. John and Leslie went to a silage demonstration, and John won another £1 and 6 shillings on the Littlewood's pools. Will it never end, all these wins? The cold stayed with us. John and Leslie then went to Salisbury, and they bought a shorthorn bull to come home to use with our herd. Then the kitchen beam caught fire above the stove. That was a fright and a half, but we got it out, put it out in the end, and then the snow began to fall. The next day it was thick, the whole world white. Doug, Marge and Malcolm West struggled up through the snow, and we spent most of the day trying to warm the house through and lit log fires in the lounge and in the dining room. Father was no better, still fragile, and the snow deepened overnight. John spent all day preparing for chicks that are due to arrive on Wednesday. The roads were dreadful, so I couldn't get to the hospital, but Mother telephoned. Father was very bad again. Monday arrived bitterly cold. The pumps were frozen, so no washing. Bet and Mother made it to the hospital through the snow this time, but Father remains desperately ill. But at last the weather brightened, so Heather and I walked to meet Jennifer, Janet and Andrew from school and felt that the cold had eased a little. John and Leslie went to Norman Cooper's, John's cousin, a Jersey farmer at North End Farm in Hursley, for the evening. And then the chicks arrived the next morning. 150 Rhode Island red pullets, tiny scraps of life cheeping in the cold but keeping warm under the heat had prepared for them in their shed. My father, though, is still very weak. The days stayed cold but sunny, seeming to promise better things without quite delivering them. Betty bought more wool for another rug she'd finished one. I wondered again when I'd make mine. Father remained unchanged. John and Leslie went to Winchester, and I went with them and visited the hospital at last. Father seemed a little brighter, and I thought I saw real improvement. But the children all had coughs, of course, as children always do in winter, and there was another fire in the beam right in the middle of cooking dinner. It was quite ridiculous. We had to get it out, put the fire out, and then we have to get it fixed. We'll deal with it as best we can. Marjorie and Doug and Malcolm West came again and bought some eggs from us, and John went to the football. But Saints lost this time, and he then went on to the flicks. On Sunday, South, the builder, came at last to inspect the troublesome beam. Let's hope he can do something about it soon. The weather now was beautiful, almost spring-like. Eric Coates, a friend of ours from Southampton, called in the evening. Andrew was home from school with a bad cold, and Father was struggling again. And so we end February 1948. A month of snowdrops and snowstorms, birthdays and hospital visits, new chicks and fading strength, and the quiet, constant work of keeping a family and a farm moving. Whatever the weather, whatever the worry, whatever tomorrow might bring. And so the first weeks of 1948 have slipped quietly by with small signs of change stirring beneath the frost. Life went on as it always must. Washing to be done, animals to tend, cows to be milked, birthdays to mark. But March is upon us with bringing brighter skies and longer light, and moments that would change our family life forever. That, though, is for the next chapter. I hope you can join me then. Take care.